It's no one's right to know what you're going through. But if you can let them, they have an opportunity for kindness. I'm Marley with Pacific Widow Solutions, and I help people who've been widowed solve problems so they can focus on grieving and healing. I had a terrible time telling people that my husband had died, especially in person. On the phone, you can kind of hang up after and don't have to experience their grief with them. But in person, you see some of that. One of the hardest moments was telling the server at the restaurant that John and I went to every Friday night. He was warm and lovely, and I dreaded letting him know. John's brother went with me that first Friday, and we walked in there, and the server looked at us sort of confused, and then he kind of threw up his hands like he was cheering, because you can tell by looking at John's brother that they're related. And I had to tell him, no, this isn't a happy occasion, and explain to him what had happened. I had a hard time going to the grocery store at first because I frequented Trader Joe's, and they knew me there. So they'd make friendly conversation, ask about my dog, ask what we were doing that weekend. They knew we went on adventures, and I didn't want to tell them, oh, I'm planning my husband's memorial. So I didn't go. I went to one of the chain grocery stores to get food, but I didn't love it. And I was telling a friend that I really wanted to go back to Trader Joe's, but I couldn't because of this problem I was having. And she says, so go to a different Trader Joe's. And I felt sort of silly that I couldn't think of that myself. But in the early stages of grief, I didn't have my full brain power. And that's part of why I think I want to offer this service. Because having someone who's not me sometimes helped think about solutions to these problems. I found it easier to type than to say out loud. And I debated telling people on the internet. I wasn't sure I wanted to, but I belong to a travel forum where people give you advice and help you plan your trips. And I wanted to go to Yosemite. I had heard that the waterfalls were particularly spectacular that year, and I wanted to see the waterfalls. And as I started to plan a trip, I knew that there were some road closures and things that I needed to understand, but I didn't have it in me to research myself. And some of the people in the California forum that I contribute to can be a little antagonistic, a little mean if you haven't done enough research. And so I decided to offset that by telling them what had happened, so that hopefully they wouldn't be mean to me, because I didn't want to deal with that. But I also couldn't do the research myself at that point. And so I did. I told them that, please go easy on me. I've suffered a sudden personal tragedy. My spouse has died without warning. And so I would appreciate this advice. And they were warm and lovely, the ones who did answer. And there were a couple of people who I thought may have avoided that topic intentionally, which is fine because they didn't want to say something. And that's, it's great. I had a good experience. And I ended up putting the trip off another week because some dear people invited me on their trip a week later, and I went with them instead. And we had a lovely time. The thing is, sometimes you don't know when the grief is going to come. They talk about grief coming in waves, and I do believe that. And you don't always know it's going to be there. And about a year after John died, I had something really bad happen. I mean, an additional something bad. I went to LA to see the opera, and while I was there, my purse was stolen. And I was mad at myself, and I was mad at the creep who took it. I was mad at myself because I think if I weren't distracted by the anniversary of my husband's death, I would have been paying more attention. But that's the thing, is that when you're grieving, you can't always do that. You can't always pay enough attention to the things you need to pay attention to. And so he got, of course, all my credit cards, my ID, my car keys, my house key, and even my favorite lipstick that I bought in New Zealand. I'll never get that back. I'd have to go to New Zealand to get one. And the greeting cards that had been given to me commemorating the anniversary of my husband's death. I've never read them, and I never will, because he took them. He stole them from me. And he stole the keychain that John had made me in his blacksmith forge. It was attached to my house key, and it's gone. One of a kind, you know. So we had to leave the opera, go home and get the other key to the house, and drive back there. A couple of us missed the first half of the opera. And then as I was driving home, I realized I didn't want to sleep in the house, because he had my ID, which of course had my address on it, and my house key. And I didn't want to be in there if he came. And I couldn't go stay in a hotel because I didn't have any cards, no credit card, you know. What I should have done is called a dear friend and said, hey, can I come stay in your guest room? But I didn't think of that. What I did instead is I slept in the yard. I went out back and slept in my hammock with my cell phone right next to me. And, you know, I sort of solved the problem, but not in the best possible way. Sleeping in the yard wasn't a great idea. And so the next day I got up, I found a little cash in the house, and I went out to breakfast. And the server there was so kind when she asked me how I was, and I started laughing uncontrollably and explained to her what had happened. We kind of knew each other. I had been there several times. She gave me a hug. And after breakfast, I went down to the beach. And I just fell apart. I was standing there sobbing, and someone I could hear came by and said, are you okay? And I couldn't stop crying long enough to tell her I wasn't okay. And she just moved on. And I don't like being super emotional in public. I mean, I try to hold it in until I'm by myself, until I can get home. But sometimes it's too much. And so I bought this hat. It's called a Fascinator, and that's spelled Fascinator. And I wore it repeatedly in that first few months. Even to Trader Joe's, I'd wear it with jeans and a t-shirt to go grocery shopping, because it makes people think twice. And it's unusual. It sort of, to me, evokes mourning attire. Like in Victorian times, women used to wear these big black dresses when they were widowed for like a year to show that they were in mourning. And at first I thought it was just a way to honor your departed spouse or whatever. But I think the greatest benefit to something like that is letting people know, hey, she might be a little off. And then, you know, if I'm a little slow to check out or a little sad, they're less likely to treat me badly. There's a song by Ice Nine Kills called Freak Flag, and it says, "Let your freak flag fly. We're all messed up inside and forced to act like everything's all right." And I think to some extent, in order to participate in the world out there, I did feel like I needed to act like everything was all right, because otherwise everything takes longer, and I don't want people to see, and I don't necessarily want to interact with strangers about this. And so I did feel a bit forced to act like everything's all right. And the hat helped because it could indicate that, she's trying, but maybe she's not okay. I'm going to end with a story that's a little funny to me. A couple months after John died, he belonged to this organization of engineers, and he was pretty involved. They decided to give him an award, a posthumous award, and they asked me to come and accept it on his behalf and give a little speech. And so I wore this hat and a black dress, and I was in a hotel banquet room, walking through the buffet line, and the server in the buffet line came up and said, "Oh, I just love your hat," like it was a fashion choice. And I don't fault her for that, but I do think she might still be mortified because, shortly thereafter, she heard me get up and say, and, John would have loved this. He, my husband died, etc., etc. And so you take a chance on getting some weird interactions. But to me, it's worth it, and I think it's not a bad idea. You can reach me, PacificWidowSolutions@gmail.com, or Instagram and YouTube, Pacific Widow Solutions. Take care.